sun's come out now that we're getting to the end. Anyway, what I'd like to do is just check first of all, everybody knows who our panellists. So we have Tanya Castell that we've heard from earlier today, so you'll all recognise Tanya. Next to Tanya we have Dalrymple, who is from the Procurator Fiscal's office, and Cat is responsible for policy and engagement, is that right?
Lots of ministerial briefings.
And then we have Derek Kilday, who's you've just been seconded to Police Scotland, is that right, Derek?
Correct, yes. Thank you very much for allowing me to lean in. Hopefully you'll get more gentlemen to lean into WiPSL in the future. Personally, I've found it very enjoyable. Leadership is leadership, and what we need to do is develop leaders. I've come from a home department who have had a 50-50 board for many, many years. Department for International Development are really strong in women and girls, and that was actually the part of what attracted me to join DFID in the first place. I've been a career civil servant for a number of years, worked in Scottish Government, had the opportunity to work in DFID to make a difference in the aid sector. It was a really engaging job for me, so since I've my back. We came to the end of our portfolio, so the Dalrymple change portfolio was changing, and we were awaiting new ministerial direction. And at that time I had an opportunity to come back and do some work with Police Scotland. So that's why I'm back with Police Scotland for 2 years. So thanks for allowing me to come here today.
Thank you, Derek, and you're very, very welcome. As I said at the start, this is not an exclusive club by any stretch of means. And our final panel member is Celia Tennant, who's the Chief Executive of Inspiring Scotland. And yep, you're very, very welcome, all of you. So we asked you this afternoon or during the day if you had any questions, and this was to see the point at which we asked people to have a show of hands. So we have questions, so thank you very much to all of those of you who decided to put some questions in. So what I'm going to do is start to run through some of those questions. I don't know that we'll have time to cover all of the questions that have come to us, so we've picked some particularly challenging ones that some of you have sent us. And we'll kick off with the first one that was, how does diversity of thought sit in a performance culture? Quite a difficult question, I think, to kick us off. And I thought I would maybe ask, I don't know, Derek, would you like to pick that one up first?
Yes, absolutely, thank you. I believe it absolutely does. Diversity of thought should be in everything that we do, at any level of leadership. And in terms of performance culture, we used to say at any given moment in time that your performance metrics are absolutely correct. They're never correct. I've been in a number of organisations, and the ones that do it well, the diversity of thought challenges that performance and how we actually measure it, because what is important is not only what you're doing internally and externally for your stakeholders. It doesn't stay the same. The world's not stable, so that needs to keep changing, and diversity and change with that. Actually challenge that performance culture to say, is this the correct metric? Is this what we need? Yeah, you have your ministerial ones that you've got to meet, but absolutely, policy can influence that as well. So I believe it does, yes.
Okay, thanks Derek. Tanya, did you want to add anything to that?
I mean, I think I would totally agree with Derek. I mean, it is diversity of thought brings performance and it enhances performance, and that's what the research shows is, you know, the diverse teams are what will give you your best performance, and therefore should bring the different perspectives to ensure that you have the right performance measures. So to me, they are consistent. The main issue is that lots of people won't necessarily appreciate that, and therefore it's about spreading the word.
Can I just
chip
in? So Elma's trying to manage this really carefully, but I think just as someone who's kind of encourages different thinking and encourages, you know, contribution, and it can be really challenging to actually incorporate really diverse thoughts into your way. So it sometimes is be careful what you wish for, but I do absolutely think that we need to encourage different thinking, and people who think very differently are quite rare, I find. Certainly both in my private sector and voluntary sector base, so we should cherish them and really listen and try and adopt, because it can absolutely be the thing that changes performance very significantly.
I think there's, sorry, just adding, I think there is a kind of perception within a lot of public sector organisation that somebody that comes with that often kind of relatively radical diversity of thought is slightly sidelined. So I think all of us have a responsibility to make sure that these individuals that have that radical diversity of thought, that we actually embrace it and really listen to it.
And I think just a final observation on that one from me, I was going to add that we heard both from Kirsty and from Fiona in different ways about diversity and how to make sure we encompass that within our overall approach. So the work that we're doing around moving people more, particularly women, more towards applying for public sector board appointments clearly recognises that mix of diversity and performance in terms of what we're looking to put onto our boards. And I think, Fiona, you were talking very much earlier on about active listening and what active listening really is, and how we make sure that we not just go through the act of getting people there, but then actually use that talent and those thoughts when we've got them. Okay, I'm going to move on to another very interesting question. Have the panel observed any behaviours that women frequently exhibit that prevent them from achieving leadership roles? And there's an example here about not applying for roles because they're not 100% fit, but there might be other examples that you've got as well. I don't know, Kat, have you come across this at all?
I'm going to tell you a little anecdotal story. I think there are kind of behaviours that some of us, not all of us, will exhibit unconsciously. And I recently had a very uncomfortable session with 3 of our executive board members where we were asking to give each other feedback, and it was a kind of leadership environment, and it was a relatively safe environment despite the fact that 3 of these people were my bosses. And we were sitting around the table, and I was the only woman there with 3 guys, and one of them said to me, "Do you know what you do that's really annoying, Kat?" I was like, "I really didn't think I was annoying." And they said, "When you ask the killer question at our meetings, you always preface it with, 'I'm sorry to ask the daft lassie question, but..." And then I asked the killer question, and they said, "You're doing yourself a disservice, because none of us think you're a daft lassie, and we always know that when you ask the question, it will be a killer question, and it will be relatively uncomfortable for us." And that was me and my feedback, and I have to say I have never once since said, "I'm going to ask the daft lassie question," because it's underselling myself, and it's putting myself down, and that was a valuable lesson to me. So I suppose what I learned from that was, when I see other people within my organisation doing similar things and exhibiting similar behaviours, I just take them aside and I say, "Actually, do you know what? Don't do that. You don't need to do that. You're your own person. You're here on your own right, on your own merit. Go for it." And I think we all have an obligation again to make sure that we do challenge those behaviours when we see them, and just try and get people, because once it is challenged, you don't do it because you realise.
Celia, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just nodding furiously because I think, great to have feedback as well, and I think something about being kind of, if you're in a kind of group setting, it's about being kind of relatively humble, about kind of just, asking a question in a very open way. And sometimes I would have said, "Can I just ask, can I do..." And someone said to me, "Don't be asking for permission, just ask the question. You don't need to do the can I, you don't need to the daft lassie thing, actually. Take your position and be confident about it." So, and I think the kind of the wider question about, it's not necessarily negative behaviours, it's really just, for me, it's always about, generally speaking, women have all the ability and have actually probably much more empathy, much more consideration, sorry gentlemen in the room, about who they're engaging with, seeking to understand, but just actually lack the confidence of the delivery. And I think for me over the years I've kind of learned actually, and having been told way back in this time in my private sector days, that an area for improvement was my self-confidence, and was actually just to grow into that. You have so much to offer. You're actually on the right track. Ask the question, don't wait for somebody else to ask it, sort of thing. Just be really confident. You have nothing to lose, and also go with that. So it's not really about negative behaviours that I've observed, it's actually just about taking your place. You deserve it.
We're happy with that, Tanya?
I could talk, but I'm just conscious of time.
I'll tell you what, you can answer the next one first.
Right.
Okay, so we've got a question about appearance, and women in public life are still judged on their appearance, and certainly I see that quite often. I know, having talked to First Minister in Scotland, she sees that and feels, I guess, almost subjected to that in public life. So the question for the panel is, How do you think we can shift attitudes to change that? What might we do to try and move that kind of approach or those attitudes towards us?
I mean, personally, I think it's incredibly difficult, and it's one of the reasons why I went on the board of a school, because I'm very conscious that a lot of this is starting at an incredibly young age, and so I went on 2 short breaks, both with families who are friends. So I don't have any kids, but my husband and I have a lot of godchildren, and when you listen to the language, just in terms of how people speak about how people are dressed, how behaviour, in terms of the gender stereotypes, we're engaging at an incredibly young age. To try and shift it, I mean, I'm in a slightly odd position that I started going into board roles at a relatively young age for how it's historically been. So I actually spend my whole time trying to look older, which is therefore a slightly perverse way of doing things. So for me, there's something about how we, at a very young age, start educating people about how they make decisions and how stereotypes are built up and how we think about some of those things. Because unless you do that, with the best will in the world, and all these people are very, they're intelligent and aware and everything else, but they're still doing it with their children at this age.
Celia, I don't know if you see that with young people. You've done quite a lot of work with young people in youth employment.
I mean, I think it's really difficult. I think it needs leadership. I think there was a report this morning about a very high percentage of young women feeling lacking confidence, touching on potential mental health issues. There was a Scottish survey that Louise from Youth Scotland gave to tell you. I think it's about 4% of 15-year-old young women in Scotland feel confident. And a lot of it's to do with appearance and stereotypes, and so it's a much bigger issue than just actually women in leadership positions and what should you look like. I think we have a massive issue that's developing, and it will be about our young people's mental health to be able to do something about it, because our young women are actually measuring themselves against impossible role models. And that's purely on appearance. I think one of the my values has always been about value diversity. See the whole person, and actually suspend any judgment you might have, actually seek to understand. And I think that's something we need. It all sounds very, it's easy to say, it's much more difficult to do. So I do think we need some really strong leadership, because it's just a tip of the iceberg unless we address the confidence issues for young women.
Well, you did touch on it there. You mentioned role models, and actually that's one of the things we do in the work with Scottish Government and the Public Appointments team, is having realistic role models that people can identify with, that don't all look like size whatever it is, that I'm definitely not.
Derek, do you find yourself subjected to that? Is that something that's on your radar, if you like?
Absolutely. I mean, part of my role, I frequently appear in front of boards and actually try to challenge that. Hence the reason I meet the stereotype, middle-aged gentleman, greying hair, 50-something. I tend not to present at boards with the typical collar and tie and all the paraphernalia that you find 80% of boards sit and do that. And on occasions I've been given a tap on the shoulder and saying, Mr. Kilday, I don't think wear attire specific for presenting in front of the board. And I always challenge that back and say, it's not about my appearance, it's what I'm presenting to you today. So I think there is something that men can do about that, and for them to step out of that traditional role as well, because actually they've got a part to play in this. We've got a part to play and challenge that diversity as well, so that all board members don't look like stereotypes of each other.
Sure.
Just thinking, one of my early experiences as a young prosecutor in court was being threatened by a sheriff for being held in contempt for wearing a trouser suit.
Well,
hopefully that was a long time ago.
About 15, 20 years ago. Yeah.
probably about the same time, Kat, I was thrown out of the sheriff's chambers for not wearing a tie.
Yeah, you're about right. So it works both ways.
Yeah.
So, another question we got in just a wee bit late, just before we started the panel, but again a really, really interesting question, and one that's been touched on a wee bit today. To what extent is it feasible for women in leadership roles to achieve a work-life balance when juggling role and board responsibilities? How can you do all of this? Can you have it all, really? So Don't know whether any of you are...
My answer to that is yes, you can have it all.
Right.
I know lots of people will disagree with that, and some people say that you can't have it all at one time, but I am firmly an advocate of the fact that you can have it all. It takes an awful lot of hard work. It takes a lot of juggling. I've got a husband and 2 boys at home, one of whom plays in a football team, John. We often stand beside each other at the side of a football pitch, and it does take a lot of juggling. It takes a lot of multitasking. It takes a lot of determination to do it. What I have built up in terms of my ability to work full-time and do the job that I do is a support network. And I have found that there's an enormous amount of support out there with similar working mums in a similar situation. And I have found that enormously helpful for me. I also go to the voluntary sector for my childcare, so I'm very fortunate in the fact that my mother helps, and but that does have a massive impact on a lot of women's ability to work. So I do absolutely recognise that. But no, I'm firmly an advocate of the fact that you can have it all. And what, in terms of our organisation, we have got, most of our women that work, and we are now predominantly a female organisation, higher percentage female than male, and a lot of our women that work in the organisation do work full time, do have children, and we manage to juggle it for a lot of people in terms of that working pattern to make sure that we can be as flexible as possible, because that is the key is flexibility.
The key is the flexibility, and I think actually that's somewhere where, my perception is the public sector is way ahead of the private sector, and that not enough of the private sector is doing enough. And this is why I'm particularly keen on making boards diverse, because that's where the culture of the organisations are set. So if we're going to change the world, which is kind of like my minor ambition, then we need to have all that diversity of thought that is going to think about how can we get the best out of every person, and that's by having the right work environment that allows people to get to do everything.
Depends, to be honest. I think it depends a lot on kind of the context and your working environment and the type of employer you have, and I think it's possible to have it all, definitely, but I think it relies on, some of us are fortunate that have, the experience, or have had, felt that you've had it all, but I think there's a lot of situations, both public sector, voluntary sector, private sector, where it's just not possible yet for women to have it all and have to make sacrifices. And I think, and I do think there is a level of sacrifice that is needed. It's just, for you personally, how much are you willing to give up? I worked away from home for most of my daughter's primary school years, sort of Monday, Thursday, commuting to London. She's not damaged by it, by any stretch. She's really confident, outgoing, independent young woman who's, is fantastic, love her dearly, and but it was always a concern. And I do think, I think it's fantastic, a very positive response, but I do think it depends. And I think a lot of women that wouldn't necessarily be in this room, who probably just can't have it all, just their circumstances, and it's them that we probably need to be thinking about, those people living in disadvantage, inequality, etc., who are actually just surviving is difficult enough. So,
I mean, I think we're at a pivotal point in Scotland in terms of certainly on the childcare issues and trying to expand that and make that much more accessible, and should actually help more women to be able to do more in terms of the workplace, and also being confident about their childcare as well. But it's going to be an important 3 years as we roll this out, for sure. Okay, I was going to kind of bring the panel session a wee bit to a close with a final question, and I'm sorry we haven't been able to ask everyone's question this afternoon, but I was going to finish up for each of you, and in true police and ministerial style from earlier, you've got a very quick moment to tell each of us what is the best bit of career or leadership advice you have ever been given. Who wants to go first?
I'll go first.
All right.
Fantastic boss I had from over from the States working in the UK kept saying, what's the key question? What is the key question that you're trying to answer? Just keep, what's the key question? Just think around that, and why are you doing what you're doing? So,
Thanks, Celia.
2 things for me probably. First one is, everybody's done all the kind of 360 analysis. Everybody tries to really work hard on their weaknesses or other areas for improvement. One boss told me, you're never going to be really good at doing the financial piece concentrating your strengths with communication, going out there and doing what you're good, that part, and make sure you've got a really good finance person in your team. So, you can't do everything, so surround yourself with good people. So that's kind of the single and most important.
Thanks, Derek.
For me, very simple, be true to your values. That's what makes me go to work every day.
I guess there were two things. One, it was more someone believed in me. So I was asked to do a job, and I just thought, I have no idea how to do that job. I was completely, utterly daunted. I thought it was an incredibly huge job, and I just thought, well, I know how to do that little bit of it. But so if someone has faith in you, just go with it. And because I realised that actually, you know, I could do it, and therefore it was a matter of just exploring. And then I guess linking back, I think it was with the first and the second question. The thing that I really feel, particularly with women, is we really undervalue ourselves. So I meet actually a lot of confident women as well as ones who are less confident. But what we're confident in that we're able to do things we know about, but actually we don't realise actually how broad our skills are and our values are. So it's try and find a way, maybe it's talking to people within your, who you know, to help ask them to help you see what you have, because I just meet so many people who are so talented, particularly when we're talking about the boardroom, and we just don't realise what we have to bring. So just find a way to extract that value, because I can guarantee you'll be undervaluing what you have.
Thank you all very much for sharing all of that. Can you pass that?